But the barrier to entry from an economic perspective is so low. And so then that saturation level of people every day has become so much higher at a rate that it's like, how could you expect anybody to even have a filter for quality and attention? It's so hard. And then so all these the ancillary elements have become more important maybe than they were in the past. Not that like marketing or promotion were ever not important. They always have been. It's just now how have the mechanics shifted? Where is the main game being played? And how do you participate in such a way that, you're offering something in those lanes? And that's a tricky balance because then it always just comes back to like, what is your band? What is your brand? Just I get a little bit too markety about it, and what feels like, I think it's an overused word, but what then feels authentic to you? And that's not as easy as it sounds, I think.
You're listening to Creatives Prevail, unraveling the stories of creative professionals.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creatives Prevail, where we dive into the stories, challenges, and decisions that help shape your own creative journey. I'm your host, Mike Zimmerlich, and each week I sit down with creators, artists, and industry professionals to uncover the lessons they've learned building their careers. My next guest is Joey Vesely from the alt-rock band Trace Remains. We also discuss their latest single, Breathing Air, as well as their upcoming EP, 0 Hour. Let's get into it. Hey, Joey, how's it going?
Hey, Mike. It's going great.
Good. Thank you so much. I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for asking. We were talking about the weather just before and how it's unusually cool here in Phoenix, Arizona. But yeah, it's interesting because with you, you were talking about before being like pretty much growing up in Pittsburgh and so forth. And but also something that I really resonated with was when I was reading about your bio and talking about the lyrics to a lot of your songs. I saw an overall theme about resolution, and I did find that kind of interesting. And I just wanted to know what resolution actually means to you, just like in an overall sense.
Yeah, I think, well, thank you again for having me on. And it's a great question. I think for me, resolution just means like I've learned during challenging times to focus on the things that I can control the most. And sometimes like, I think I've had a lot of experiences where I got really hung up on things that were affecting me that I just was out of my control. And it ends up being this like, you kind of, maybe there's like not as much growth in those moments, I think, because you just can't, you can't see past a variable that is just beyond you. So I think a lot of times for me, resolution has become whatever the challenge might be, trying to find a way to make it about like, even if it's an obstacle that feels particularly hard, that there's some lesson, there's some room for growth in there, but it's all about the thing that is in front of me and in the moment and in today, and not getting too hung up on what brought me here or, maybe triggered the obstacle or whatever. So I think it's a combination of just those things and figuring out like, how do I navigate this and get my life tools sharp enough that I feel like I can maybe find a way to not be reliant on the other party to make resolution or to help me find resolution. Or if it was like the loss of somebody that I loved, it's not even a relationship. It's just, there's a way of maybe a difference between making peace and finding peace, perhaps. And I think resolution somewhere is like in there for me. It's about growth and finding lessons through the times of life. And I think really that's probably in a nutshell what it comes down to, I think, for me.
That's a great perspective to have. And it's a really hard one to have, but it's a great perspective to have, is understanding when you don't have a control over a situation and is how you're reacting to it. But then also too, what it means to, like you said, to the difference between making and finding peace. And I think it's important to have that mentality too, because this, what you do, right, when you're working on your craft, this is literally a team effort. I mean, you have a band, right? So it's a team effort. So understanding that there's going to be conflict and there are going to be situations that you cannot control, whatever the case might be, like whether it's a show or a recording studio or even writing or having rehearsals, whatever the case is, and being able to find resolution to whatever conflict comes up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's I think whether it's in interpersonal relationships and things that you can learn from in terms of like how to relate to people, or air traffic control to keep the ship moving, because it is a team, it really is, and not just the band itself, but all the folks around the band that help make things go in some way or another. And it's always an approximation, I think, across all those ranges, whether it's where the art lands or the music lands, how the communication around where things landed goes. And then maybe even back to lyrics for a second, is one thing I thought about in terms of resolution. Is just, a song we have coming up on the EP, which I'm sure we'll get to a little bit, is something like a terminal disease or something that's just unforeseen, that either you or somebody you love, that is just, all of a sudden life hits you fast in a way that you didn't even anticipate when you woke up. And so I think to maybe put a bow on the resolution piece, it's like feeling like I'm waking up every day and having a sense of presence. And that doesn't mean that like I'm Pollyanna-ish about, I'm like artificially happy every day. Like, far from it. But I think trying to find a way to be thankful for the things that have come my way or that could potentially come my way still. And, because that sort of lends itself, I think, back to having a sense of control, and not in a way that you need to control something because you're insecure, but just it's how can I find some silver linings either for a challenging time or even through a time in the band where it's like, man, nobody's happy right now. And, I don't. So it's just, 100%. But trying to find a way through that where it's like also understanding that it's not all rainbows and unicorns, and even the way the diplomacy goes, you got to have thick skin for it sometimes. And I'm sure that piece will dovetail to some of the challenges within the industry right now too. But there's a lot of stuff there. So.
Absolutely. Now I'm curious, is Trace Remains the first project you're ever in, or you were in other projects prior to the band?
No, I've been in a lot of bands prior to this. Going, back to, being a young baby, really, playing in bands in high school and stuff. But no, my first serious band was a band called Picadori that was from Pittsburgh and was very much involved in the first wave of the Mr. Roboto project, which is sort of a legendary DIY venue in Pittsburgh. At this point, it's been around 25 years, I guess, at least. In some form or fashion. So was part of the underground scene in Pittsburgh since I first discovered it when I was in high school, and that was like finding a secret kingdom. And so when I moved to Pittsburgh from I grew up about an hour south of the city, which quite frankly, like Pittsburgh could have been New York City, it could have been downtown Manhattan for all I cared. It was so different from where I came from that just the rhythm of the city alone and all of the culture itself just around that, let alone the underground and the subculture, was like just a revelation for me. So learning about the scene, and then ultimately when I moved here and was able to form a band and start sort of participating in it in that way, that was my very first experience, like a lot of things, DIY, putting out records, doing shows, doing tours, like all that stuff, meeting people, finding your tribe, really. And then over the years, just different iterations of projects, kind of always in the same vein musically, I would say. It's sort of from Picadori always sort of spawned out from there and had its own natural evolution and arc. If, you happen to ever listen to that stuff, I think you'll hear a clear through line all the way to Trace Remains. So, but it was really Picadori and then a band called Allies, right around when the internet was taken off, that we were, this one of the same guys I co-founded Picadori with, we continued on with Allies, and then we were like, wait, this is a bad name for a band. You put Allies in the search engine, not finding anything there.
I'm glad that you realized that.
It's like, yes. All right, this ain't gonna work, and then that band ended up folding, and that ultimately evolved into Trace Remains, which formed in roughly 2017. So wow. There's been various iterations of sort of rock and roll, alternative rock, post-hardcore type projects that I've been in, but yeah, Trace Remains is just the latest and hopefully greatest evolution of it so far.
So, like, were you like super into like going to shows as a kid, like, in high school, things like that too, or like, I'm just kind of curious why you decided to like how you discovered the DIY scene in Pittsburgh. Was it just because you want to get into in a band, or just kind of happened to be put upon you?
No, man. I mean, so when I was in junior high, I got exposed to a couple records that blew my mind. And I went to Catholic school. So you have to keep in mind that this further blew my mind when I first heard like the Dead Milkmen and Minor Threat. And then when I heard Nirvana for the first time, it was like, whoa, and just sort of figuring out like, where does this music come from? And there still is to this day, there's a music store in downtown Pittsburgh that's sort of a music comic store that's called Ides Entertainment. And I remember one time my dad took me there to shop for comic books, and I saw that they had all these records, and then they had fanzines, and it was like, whoa, like in print, like Maximum Rock and Roll and Heart Attack and Punk Planet and all this stuff. It was like, wow, this is like it's like a map. It's like there's something here, and it really opened up a secret world to me. So like I was always a very avid and voracious reader growing up, because just growing up out in the country and just that, a lot of times just all I could do is be in a book. So like just whether it was reading about records or scenes or bands, fashion, like I wanted to be as knowledgeable about things as I could, so that if I showed up, it was like, oh yeah, I know all this stuff already, even though you're secretly like, whoa, just trying to figure it out in real time. So it really just started from there, and just a love of music and a love of the ideas. And I think growing up, I always felt like an outcast, probably like a lot of us do, to find our way into this stuff. And punk rock and that subculture and the Pittsburgh underground really just was a home for me. So when I moved here, it was just a really natural. I was able to just get more and more involved through the band, the bands that were active and stuff, and learning even more about them, the ins and outs of the different sub scenes within the scene. Like Pittsburgh has a deep math rock history and a deep crust punk history, and that was sort of the angle I came in on, was the crust punk angle, and learning about indie rock and all this stuff. So you're just like, whoa, there's all these other layers to it. So that's really how I got into it, and just a love of bands, love of music, love of the ideas, love of the culture, and just really, I think ultimately a love of the idea that I think is at the foundation of DIY for me, which is that, it's like I've always loved the rebelliousness of punk rock. But I think hardcore and DIY were more about, well, we don't, yeah, we can throw the brick through the window, and perhaps there's a place for that. But ultimately, let's just set up a system that's separate, and let's just do our thing and not concern ourselves with something that we can't control. So what can we control? We can find basements. We can find random places to play. We can figure out ways to put out records. And that was just very compelling to me, because it felt like something you could actually do. That became addictive, just learning about it. So I became very passionate about the scene in general, and just started putting out records within the scene, and was very influenced by Discord Records when I discovered Fugazi and the Discord model, which was like, they only released records within Washington, D.C. So I did a similar thing with, I was just release Pittsburgh records and try to foster community that way. And I've always just kind of been in it for love of the game, I guess, in some ways. I don't know if I answered your question. I went on a ramble a bit, but
no, that was great. Like I really appreciate the fact that you mentioned about that. Even at an early age, you were very adamant about learning as much as you possibly can about lots of different subjects, and then also seeing what others have done in the scene and going, okay, yeah, that was actually smart, and also focusing on a specific area, because you mentioned about like, let's just drop records where, in our neighborhood, essentially, which I think is a very smart move, right? Because you're focusing on what's local, which is obviously like the people that are going to go and want to see you perform. So if you're digging your music and so forth and getting to know you, well then, hey, yeah, we're playing at this venue, next week, you should go and check us out, right? It's an easy sell for them, rather than, hey, yeah, maybe we'll come and visit you, be touring to your city in like a year or so, right? So it's more immediate, it's more front facing in that particular way. And I think that's still true to today, right? Because you do have the capabilities of reaching, people across the entire globe, But there's something also to be said about, in addition to that, not replacement, but in addition to that, to focusing on your local music scene. I think it's so important. I know, like, the Phoenix music scene here is fantastic, and you build so many connections and relationships with other bands. Not to mention, you are now coming back to similar crowds, and that's how you build your fan bases from that.
Sure. Yeah. And for me too, it was also just about, it was less about, starting a record label and more like, how can I contribute to the community and help foster that? And it was like, well, I figured out how to put out records, and yeah, the other bands within the community that have kind of like coming up through the ranks and, really honing their craft, and, it just kind of is a way to give them a platform, and then, deepen ties in other cities, because then they're going and touring. And, it was sort of like, I think a lot of that still exists, but then the internet and sort of the way, the ability to reach everybody instantaneously just sort of shifted the mechanics of how things, are now. But at least when I was starting out, some of it with the record label stuff was just as much that too. Like you said, like it's a way to meet people and facilitate networks, and just getting music out there for people that otherwise wouldn't have been able to before streaming was even early, I think.
Yeah, that's true. I started an independent record label. I've ran a label for about 18 years, so I started it back in 2008. And so awesome, I remember that time very well. Like, this was pre-streaming. This was MySpace era. This was this was Napster time, when people were downloading music in not so kosher ways. But I know.
Yeah, LimeWire, I think was
LimeWire, all those things. But that's the thing, is like, but we download, there are a lot of artists, including the artists that I represented, that we were like, well, like, if this is such a powerful tool right now for distribution, why not take advantage of it? Why not use this as a platform to getting the music out there and get and find a way to get this to help us get fans, and then use that to get them to come to shows, to buy merchandise, to do all those different types of things, right? So,
and to sort of build legitimacy too. Like, hey, it's worth paying attention to. There's we're building something here. We're investing in an infrastructure that hopefully you will find worth your valuable time as well. I think that's the way I've tried to look at it too. Like, what's the offer? Not like a salesy way, but just, people's time is so precious.
That's exactly right. It's about people's time. Why should people invest their time into listening to what you are creating, right? Or just in general, just paying attention to what you're creating, right?
Totally.
So that's the number one thing. That's before everything else, before merchandise, before anything else. It's that. It has to start there. Is like, why are they investing their time to be entertained by what you're creating, and to be moved by what you're creating, by the art that you are creating, right? It has to start from there first, and then everything else comes along with it. And it's hard, I get it, because some people are thinking about the monetary aspect of things. Well, how am I going to make money from this? And they're thinking about all these other ways of trying to, buy my CD, buy my vinyl, go stream here and so forth. But
move the needle.
It has to start there. Yeah, it's going to move the needle, but it has to start there first. Like, why should I be paying attention to you specifically when it's an infinite number of supply of art that's being created right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That's totally right. And I'm sure it is a natural segue, it's talking about the industry today in many ways, because I think that's one of the things that's hard to, I don't want to say accept as an artist or a creator, but just to navigate that, you got to step outside of yourself in terms of how attached you are to something, and accept that sometimes this just isn't compelling enough, and that's not a personal thing. Sometimes that's just a timing thing too. There's so many elements to it. And I mean, I remember first playing in bands when the easiest way to get your music out there, because streaming wasn't a thing and MySpace was just coming and stuff, was really still CDs. That was like vinyl was expensive, cassettes wasn't like a revival. That was just sort of a waste of money. It wasn't a format people use. Now it's, cassettes and vinyl have become more of a fetish thing. I don't mean that in a bad way, but they're more collectibles. But the CD was just the cheapest way to get it out there. People still had CD players in cars consistently, and all that kind of thing. And I remember thinking wow, just the fact that the cost of CDs were relatively, the barrier to entry was low from that perspective, there were so many bands like when I was trying to start out, just from that perspective. And now you remove the physical need to get anything out there. And it's just, oh, I can just pay a distribution fee. Or in the case of MySpace or SoundCloud, I mean, which is kind of fallen by the wayside, both of those, but you know, I'm going to upload it for free, you know? TikTok, Instagram, I can just upload a snippet for free, you know? So if I want somebody to stream it, I still got to pay for a distribution. But the barrier to entry from an economic perspective is so low. And so then that saturation level of people every day has become so much higher at a rate that it's like, how could you expect anybody to even have a filter for quality and attention? It's so hard. And then so all these other the ancillary elements have become more important maybe than they were in the past. Not that like marketing or promotion were ever not important. I think they always have been. It's just now how have the mechanics shifted? Where is the main game being played? And how do you participate in such a way that, you know, you're offering something in those lanes? And that's a tricky balance because then it always just comes back to like, what is your band? What is your brand? Just I get a little bit too markety about it, but you know, and what feels like, I think it's an overused word, but what then feels authentic to you? And that's not as easy as it sounds, I think.
It isn't.
To be honest, in 2026, I think that's one of the main challenges because every day, 365 days a year, you have an opportunity to market yourself in some way or to connect or find people in some way. But how you convey that in in a manner that isn't like, that just feels right for what you're trying. And I don't even mean like non-cringy or whatever, because I think all of that stuff has a role. But it's like, how do you pick each of those little tactics that add up to be what you're trying to get across? And I just think that, to me, that's one of the things that's really hard for myself, at least. Figuring out ways to craft that feel, you know, real to you, and then also authentic to the world that you're trying to build to see if people are interested. You know, going back to the point about time and attention, I guess. So I don't know. Different TED talk there, but
no. But I'm curious though. How do you navigate through that? Like, how do you navigate to making sure that you're getting people's attention, but at the same token being authentic to who you are as an artist?
Honestly, man, Mike, it's really hard. Like, I think it's always every day I think about this stuff. Every day I'm trying to evaluate. You know, working on this band is basically a full-time job for me. And so a big part of it is like, how do I, especially as the EP is getting ready to come out, how do we really craft content that feels like it's not what we've kind of done in the past that maybe didn't resonate, but that isn't just taking something that's just maybe a little bit too boilerplate? You know, how do you find that connection with sort of resonating emotionally, authentically? It's hard. I mean, I think some of it just comes down to trying not to be afraid to try things. And I've been guilty of this a lot where it's just you overthink it. And I think it's just keep trying stuff, put it together, keep trying. You learn a lot more as much as you can yourself. That's probably an overstated piece of advice too. But, you know, I've had to try to get a little dangerous with CapCut and Final is what is the one? Final Cut Pro, I think.
Final Cut Pro, yeah.
So yeah, just enough to try to like, you know, people that I have great people that help me on the video side, and I'm thankful for that. But they get busy and they can't always, you know. So it's like I've tried to find enough where it's like, give me enough B-roll, I can learn enough to be dangerous. And so I don't know. I don't have a great answer to that yet. I think it's really been suboptimal for us, and quite frankly, maybe in some respects, an impediment to growth. But then it's funny. Like I was just reading an article the other day. I think in Pigeons and Planes, maybe, which is an online sort of webzine that's come back, and I think it was in that they did a piece about a burgeoning scene in Chicago that really started with like high school kids in the tail end of COVID, and a lot of it, the ethos now is sort of based around not advertising the show. You know, it's sort of taking this Ask a Punk idea to the nth degree, where you're on Discords or it's not even on social media, and it's sort of a rejection of all of that stuff. And
interesting.
You know, I think you have to be of a certain community to be able to pull that off in a certain time and place. And that's, you know, it's easier when you're more plugged in socially in such a way that, you know, those things are easy to hear about more organically. But the longer you're kind of around and the older you get, that stuff's a little harder to navigate. So it's like, you know, how to use the tools that are more at your disposal is, I don't have a great answer to that because I'm still in real time trying to figure it out.
No,
if your audience have great content ideas, like, send them my way. You know,
But no, but I really like what you said on a couple levels. So it's also, I do want to make a comment about that article because that's really fascinating. And there's something to be said about that, right? Where we're getting constantly being pitched to on social media where they're taking on the side of, hey, we're only telling the people that legitimately want to see us perform. Right. Because those are the people that are going to go to their Discord channels and they're going to be chatting with them or forming these groups. It's like, these are the people who are actively want to be involved, like, or actively want to engage with the band and actively want to know what they have going on. And those are the people that really should know about it. Now, technically, would they also be following them on social media? Yes. Right. So that's the whole point. Right. But I like the idea of the fact that they are just pitching to the core fans, right? I don't even call it super fans. I'm just saying the core fans that will show up. And there's something to be said about the almost like the exclusivity, if you will.
That's the word I was going to use. And it's unintentional exclusivity, but it's almost like, you know, hyped show or tickets or, you know, people would go crazy for sneakers or all these types of things. Like the scarcity becomes the main tactic of the marketing, which is not what they're going for in that scene. I think it's more of like almost like an old school DIY rejection of what they're bombarded with, because for those kids, it's like, you know, I didn't grow up on a phone. You know, I was sort of able to see this transition in society from analog to digital, which has been a fascinating observation and kind of time to just participate in life as a human. But for other people, it's like all I ever knew was always being plugged in and everything being accessible. And so I sort of get the inherent punk rockness and, you know, to that, where it's like, no, forget about it. It's this, you know, the inability to find it is what makes it cool. And I think that is sort of a very moment in time community, like that's a very specific thing. I don't think that, you know, and then that could be a spark to find a way to growth, right? Because you can, you know, it maybe is a wrong way to say you can build hype through that, but if the right people see it, it becomes word of mouth, and scarcity becomes its own driver of like, oh, how do I even find out about this? And how do I not know about this? Oh, and I can't even get in and I can't even find out. That creates its own type of tension. And so they don't realize it, but it's actually quite brilliant if you could find a way to be a part of it. That's maybe crude, but
no, absolutely. But again, it comes down to scarcity. It comes down to getting people to pay attention. Again, coming back to you know, getting people to pay attention to what you're doing. And again, I agree with you that it's actually a brilliant move. I am curious though, going back to developing content. I also admire the fact that you took it upon yourself to try different things to see what works and also just as important, if not more important, what doesn't work, right? And because that's part of the process. So I'm kind of curious do you have an example of something that you did that worked really well? And do you have an example of something that you thought would work really well that actually didn't? And this doesn't have to be content. It could be any kind of promotion, honestly, any kind of marketing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this is probably just because of audience reach, but I think anytime you like are working with somebody and you do like a collaboration together, I've always found that that Venn diagram is really like, it almost like, I forget what they call it. There's like the rule of the third follower or something like that, where it's like, you know, the first person to raise their hand is like taking a risk. This is the first person to follow them, which is the second person kind of taking a risk. But that third person is like, oh, there's two people with their hands up. Like, you know, I participate in this conversation. So it becomes almost like, I think today I always refer to it as the attention economy. And it's like this weird flip where, because people are so bombarded with stuff, it's like, what the barrier is to even feel compelled to even engage is interesting. And so I have found that anytime there's like a balance between the content being produced enough that it's like, oh, that looks really cool. But a couple of my friends are a part of this too. So wow, it looks even cooler. And so now it's like, you know, you're sort of building a community just around one post, and it might only ever really exist around that one post. But I've found that for us, like a lot of times, like when we're teasing a music video or, you know, there's some cool little teaser that is just like a little snippet from the video that nobody has seen yet. And it's like, you know, you're kind of peeking the curtain back a little bit. Like that stuff tends to do well. And then anytime something actually does get released and there's some collaboration around it, and you're sort of spreading the word, like sometimes those posts like will be more like deeper in narrative. And it's interesting that I think even if people don't engage a lot with comments, there are moments where, not every post I think you need to be long and sort of like journalistic about it, or like Dear Diary about it. But I found that moments where you're opening up the kimono just a little bit when you're either trying to celebrate or offer something new to the world, there's like an air of vulnerability there sometimes. And I think if people maybe don't totally engage from a comment or like, you'll still notice that they looked at it a lot or viewed it or maybe, sent it along to somebody. So a lot of times I've seen those things do good, or like, like a behind the scenes shot, or like an action shot from a video with some of the actors, because it's like, whoa, what's that? It's not just the band rocking out again or whatever, or we have a lot of cool shots like that. So people can see that and it's like a dime a dozen. But I think anytime you feel like maybe you're doing something new, even from it's like, oh, nobody's seen this person involved with this project yet. Oh, that's cool. Now I'm curious about just what you have going on. I've seen those always seem to do pretty well. And then there's ones I thought would do better, like like we did for the last record, we did a recreation of do you remember that old, like I think it's Memorex or maybe Maxell tapes, where it's like the guy sitting in the chair and like the high fidelity comes across, and like the couch moves across. Like we recreated that for the record, where it was like the opening scene is the butler dropping a needle on our record, and it's like the sound of the record comes out and it blows the guy away, and it's just like, we did a whole thing about it. And I thought that would like maybe, people would find that a little cooler than they thought, but then it was that kind of thing where it's like, was it too cool and you just like didn't like it that way? So I never know where like the line is between, it's like, oh man, and then the ones that sometimes there's like, I don't say, sometimes it's totally random, man. Like you could have like a little carousel sweep from like your show, and you're like, oh, there's some really awesome picks, and it just kind of falls like an anvil. So, but I think it just goes back to 365 days a year to offer something. And if you can try to find a way to not be spammy, I think that's the sweet spot. But I haven't really figured out any pattern, which is why I just keep trying stuff. If we come up with cool ideas, and for me, the biggest impediment is just coming up with an idea that I feel like I can actually execute that fits the vibe of the band, And the stuff I wish I could get better at is almost like this stuff where I'm talking to the screen, but in a way that is like authentic to me or something, or at least, maybe not that's the wrong word, but like within the world of like, like talking about a song's subject matter. Like, how can I talk about breathing air in such a way that is more like this production quality where I'm in front of like a webcam or something, but it still is 7 seconds or 10 seconds of something.
Right.
I don't know. That's hard. I haven't cracked that one.
You're not the only one. There's so many, including myself. Like we're all figuring it out. Like it's just really, really hard to do. And oftentimes once you figure out what it is that's working, just because you do it over and over again doesn't necessarily mean it's going to always continue to work.
No,
right?
It could shift on you again. Absolutely.
It can shift on you again. And the other thing too, I discovered is that there are a number of artists where they find the thing that works, but it may have nothing to do with music at all. And then the people who are following them are in it for whatever that thing is and not actually the music. And that's the other thing too, you got to be careful about is like, it's fun to do skits. It's fun to do like to experiment and do other things and so forth and try different things out. But it still has to be, the core of it has to be what you're trying to trying to convey and trying to release, which in this case is music, right? So there has to be some sort of tie-in back into the project itself, back into the music itself, back into the performance itself. Because if it's something completely different, then when you're like, oh, check out my new single, we're like, no, we don't care. We want the thing that you're known for.
100%. I mean, like, I love the AI slop cat videos. I have 2 cats and I love the AI, and so like when that comes across my feed, I'm like, I love this. And I thought, can I make in Trace Remains AI cat slop video? And I was like, I could. And I'd probably attract all kinds of people that like, hey, I cut slap like me, but they're not going to like stick around because they want to hear breathing air, you know? So you're totally right. And it's like, I think that's like, and it becomes not even about looking like desperate. It's just, it doesn't fit. And so how do you, and that's where I think sometimes it just becomes about slow and steady, you know, and trying not to overthink it too much. And I've had to work on this a lot myself, like not being too attached to outcomes or chasing outcomes or expectations, just being thankful about, okay, that show was really rad, you know, like I love the place this video is landing. I feel really thankful for all the people that were involved in it. And, you know, just trying to put that out there and to find ways to package that. And, you know, over time, hopefully just pick up more ideas and maybe, you know, you know, for this we've not done this yet. And this is sort of a new thing. So for this EP, we're going to try like some of the old school, like band related tactics. Like, you know, we have 3 videos, one of which came out, Zero Hours, the first single that came out a couple months ago. And we have a video that came out around that. And there was a little bit of like B-roll stuff around that we used to promote. And we'll do the same thing with the other videos. But I think also mixing it up with a little bit more of that more well-produced band content where it's like, I'm not saying this, but this is just off the cuff. Like, oh, we're in a warehouse with the swinging light. And so let's do that shoot. Now let's go outside and maybe just take me and do the shoot in the field or in the parking lot. Or, I mean, I'm not being creative with these ideas, but hopefully you get the idea of where I'm going with is just trying to do some of this, find different locations, maybe some more lyric videos, find ways that, okay, this location could exist within the world of the band, but it's not terribly overthought. And then you don't even have to listen to the music. You could just read the words. I mean, I think a lot of people scroll on silent. I know I do sometimes. And so let's lead into that. How can we find a way to keep the visual look interesting enough? And then what is that? Is that a lyric? Is it an announcement about something? So I don't have that all planned out yet, but I'm working with some folks on my team to try to get that, like, get as detailed for us as we can in that as we move through each of these songs and through the long tail of the promotion of the EP, you know, all the way through the end of the summer and into the fall and beyond, really. And, you know, I don't think it ever stops. I think I heard this somewhere more than once where it's like, it might be like played out to you, but chances are for most of the world, the fact that the vast majority of the world, they never even heard it, even if it's 5 years old. So
that's, you know, very, very true.
You know, find ways to keep doing it. And I think that's sometimes something I've had to get used to is like, don't get too caught up on the fatigue of like, oh, I'm spamming people. Yes and no, depending on what it is. So, and this, maybe I'll shut up after this piece of it, but with TikTok, it's like, I think, and I haven't been as good there. That's an area of improvement for the latter half of 2026, I think, for me, for sure. But I feel like the way the algorithms treat that's differently than Instagram. So like the way you curate on Instagram for your actual band page could be much different than the sort of maybe lesser thought out stuff that still plays a role, but you could put out on TikTok 5 or 6 days a week or whatever and not worry about it as much. And then one thing too, Mike, that I promise, I said that was the last thing I'll say, but last thing.
Oh, keep it going. This is great. This is great. Keep it going.
Is like, some people even suggested, I know some people on what I'd say the cutting edge of marketing that are playing in all those sandboxes of user generated campaigns and what Chaotic Good did with Geese and, you know, other bands, bands like that. And which isn't new to them. They kind of got hammered for that, but I feel like it was kind of unfair. And, you know, stuff that's just like, this isn't bot related, but they'll set up like 2 or 3 fan pages, which are almost like Finsta versions of your band page, but it's like it's like you're not worried about people that are really following you yet. It's more about, okay, I can in a low pressure way throw more stuff out on this page, and maybe it's just getting fed into like that discover page or this, you know, the search page or just in somebody's feed, wherever suggested for you or whatever. And that could also be a tactic. We haven't tried that yet. So I think there's always like, I like to make metaphors a lot. I feel like there's always these piers that you could fish off of, and you just never quite know if you're going to catch fish at all. And if you do, is it a catfish? Is it a dolphin? I don't want to catch dolphins. What is it? What do you catch? A tuna,
whatever. Yeah. I'm trying to find a better one for you.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think like there's so many like areas to explore, and then when you don't have it, like when you're sort of like the one-stop shop and within the project, which so many of us are. Again, I feel lucky to have some people that do help me, but A lot of creators don't, a lot of musicians don't. And that's where it becomes exhausting. And I think burnout really sets in because you're just like, oh my goodness, like I can't. It's like Groundhog Day, like that movie, Bill Murray. It's like, what? I'm doing this again. Oh, but that's just part of it. Just keeping going, building the plane as we're flying it.
So how do you make sure that you try to prevent as much burnout as possible for yourself? You mentioned about having a team, which is always fantastic to make sure that the load is not entirely on you. But is there anything else that you do to help yourself mitigate that?
I mean, I do get burnout. I'm not gonna lie, but I think some of it is like finding your ways to the moments that fill you up. And anytime we work on a music video, I love it. It's super fun. I love working with all the film folks and the director and the director, director of photography, all the actors. Everybody's always involved in the stuff that we've been doing lately. It's just so rad to watch other creators work, costume designers, set designers. Like it's really cool. And anytime I get a handful of days to be a part of that, I really feel blessed because it's just it's a reminder for why I do it, because you feel empowered when you're around other creatives that are helping you bring something to life that's just like a vision and an idea. And so those moments are really important. Getting into the studio where you're laying down your new songs, the pre-production process and the demoing process can be very laborious, but is very much a part of it. And it's a part of it that I really love. And when you finally get to the studio and you see how it's coming alive, those are filling up the tank moments. But perhaps the biggest of all is when you get to a live show that really delivers, and those will fill you up for a long time, man. Those can fill the tank up for quite a while. So I try to have enough of those types of things metered out throughout the quarters of the year, and throughout the year, where you're like, all right, we just get to this. And, but no, I mean, burnout is very real, and it's every day. I think I know for myself personally, just speaking personally, outside of like just what I do day to day for the band, it's like making sure I try to get enough sleep. As long as I can get 7 hours, and 8 is great. I feel pretty good. Like my attitude's in a good place, and I feel like I'm rested. I try to exercise 4 or 5 days a week if I can, and that really keeps me just like going. And it's a routine too, so it's a thing where it's like I have a small group of people that I do that with, and that's been sort of an accountability thing. I call it my version of going to church. Growing up Catholic, I'm not a churchgoer anymore in my adult life, really, but I always have really appreciated the routine of the discipline involved in that sort of spiritual discipline, if you will, even though I don't mean that in a religious way from a working out perspective. But I think there's just something to consistency and routine that if you can find outside of your craft and your work and your career, whatever it is, because for a lot of us, the music or what we're working on is our career. That's what we're all in on. So I think having those things is important to mitigate and minimize the burnout. But I think anybody that tells you that they've been doing this for any stretch of time doesn't get burnout, and sort of some mix of burnout, imposter syndrome, and I'm just straight up done because I don't think I can overcome another obstacle because this is so Sisyphusian that I'm just over it. I think they'd be lying to you if they told you that doesn't exist.
Yes, so I can very much attest to that. Absolutely. I do want to talk about your single, Breathing Air, which is awesome, by the way. I absolutely love it. Can you talk a little bit more about the single?
Yeah, awesome. Sure. No, thank you for the kind words. So Breathing Air comes out June. What is the date? Oh gosh, I'm so bad about this.
It's coming out soon. So soon from
June 9th it comes out.
June 9th. So this episode will probably come out then when it's out. So
it's out now. This is a song that we came together quickly. I wrote the skeleton of this song sort of last summer, I guess, and we had 3 songs that were in the bag that we were originally just going to release three songs. They're all a part of the 6-song EP, and then some of the folks on the team were like, "Hey, like we're putting some weight behind promotional efforts and stuff. Like, can you put more meat on the bone? Like, how hard would that be?" And I think we could probably do that, So heading into last winter, we were trying to spin up the best material we could at the time, and I had that piece of music and that song pretty much fleshed out and brought it to the band, and it went through their filter, and then our recording engineer, and our producer Dave Heideck that I've worked on all the Trace Remains stuff with. He kind of gets his fingerprints on it, and it just kind of came to life from there. We went through our typical process, really, and it just found a natural home to be the second single. I think it's just it checked a lot of boxes for us. It's if I could get I don't have any tattoos, but if I would maybe get one, it would be 333, 3 minutes and 33 seconds is sort of the magic number. I think a lot of times with songs and music and singles and attention spans and pop rock, if that's the world you're kind of playing in, even though we're alternative rock and post-hardcore at the end of the day, to me, it's like a lot of it's pop rock, and, we're trying to earworm people and, keep them focused. So that really felt like that checked all those boxes, and it was a pretty ferocious song, I felt like, too. And but yeah, and then the video was killer. I'll have to send that to you, Mike, so you can see a rough cut of that, because I think you'll appreciate that. And but yeah, that's just kind of how it came together. I don't know if that really answers your question, but I'm super stoked on it. I think it's like, of all the singles we've dropped, I'm maybe everybody says it's their latest thing, the thing they're most proud of, but I'm really proud of it, and really excited to see what people think about it. I think it rips pretty hard, and like I said, man, 3 minutes and 24 seconds. I think the song is, dude, doing it out and rip. So
yep. It's so funny, right? It's like we still have that mentality. It's the radio mentality, right? It's like getting it like around that 3 minute mark, but it just happens to work. I think we just all now accustomed to having songs that are that length. And I think also too, it helps it, again, coming back to the mention about discipline, it helps discipline you going, okay, we're like, let's trim the fat. Where can we get to make sure we're hitting those marks, so we're really keeping people interested and engaged throughout the entire song.
Yeah. And it goes back to the time thing. And I really believe in life, and maybe this goes a little bit back to the beginning of our conversation with resolution, and the time and health are our most precious assets. And these are themes that kind of run through the music. And I don't ever presume that I'm owed anything, or people should listen to anything I put out there, anything I have to say. And why should you, So I always just look at it as like a gift, if there's an audience there, how can I be judicious with their time and put the hardest amount of work I can into the art to curate it, to such a degree that it feels ready for that type of consumption, that it's like, hey, like, I feel like I've earned your 3 minutes and 24 seconds because I don't deserve it. But hopefully in this instance, you as the listener, I feel like, I've heard, or you feel glad to give you that time. So I don't know. I just think I take that charge very seriously as a musician and as an artist. I think like, whether it's earworms or working really hard on songs, I think that takes a long time in your creative development to feel comfortable with and to feel like you've gotten good at. I know at least it did for me. I did not feel like I was great at that out of the gate. And I think some of that is working on letting your ego go, number one. I think that's a big one. Like finding the line between maintaining that, okay, I'm essentially the creative director of the band, so I'm in that role for a reason, but it's also great to have other people really feel comfortable to offer their opinion on what they think, because it's going to make this better. It's going to elevate it. And becoming comfortable working with producers and engineers and the right team members to elevate the Trace Remains music, I think is a lesson I've had to learn over the course of being in bands and working with people. And writing songs it's not easy. And trying to write good songs is really freaking hard. And it takes a long time. I mean, sometimes you catch lightning in a bottle, but most of the time you don't. But most people don't. So it's why all the greats you've seen, like, oh, this was recorded over the span of like a year. Yeah, they had the budget from a major label, so that was part of the beauty of that, and they could do it. And well, when a budget was an advance, so they had to pay it back. But still, that's these. Sometimes it's not. I mean, a lot of the old school punk rockers and the Steve Albinis of the world are, let's step in, let's get the document, let's get it live. And there's a time and a place, and I've been a beauty in that aesthetic too. And I've done a lot of that, and we still work that way to this day on Elements, when we were like record with scratch tracking and stuff, and we maintain some of the energy of that. But yeah, I don't know. I just think like being judicious, being focused, and being curated are good tenets to have within the rhythms of the everyday work of how you make decisions about your craft.
Absolutely. Well, I'm very much can't wait for everyone else to hear the song, the single as well. And I did also want to mention about you mentioned before about the 0 Hour, the EP that's coming up as well. So very excited about that. So how many songs are going to be on? Are you still figuring out how many songs are on it? What's could you
No, we got it locked and loaded. We got 6 songs.
Nice.
0 Hours, the lead off single. Breathing Air is going to be the second single. There's a song called Please Disregard, which will be the third single. And yeah, that comes out in mid-July. I think it's July 14th or something. So right in the middle of the month.
Coming up fast. Yeah,
it's coming up really fast. So we'll have a third video that drops that week, and the EP will come out. I think we'll have it available on vinyl and cassette. I haven't done cassettes. I want to do a really small run. I have a manufacturer that can do like 50 of them for me. So I thought that'd be kind of cool. And yeah, I'm excited for it. We haven't released music in almost 2 years, and outside of the 0 Hour singles. So I'm super excited to just see what the world thinks of it. And, it's that moment again to sort of be like, okay, here it is. That's it.
Here it is. Let's see how it goes. Yeah. Exactly. Well, I'm very excited. Can't wait to hear all the rest of the songs off of the EP. And, we can start wrapping things up here. I do have a couple of fun questions for you. So the first question I have for you is, what was the very first concert that you ever went to?
Very first concert. Oh God. So this is funny. We show my age a little bit here, I guess. So my very first concert was Bon Jovi.
Nice.
I begged my parents to take me. They came through Pittsburgh on a tour, and it was just an absolute revelation to me. Not because Bon Jovi's music is particularly amazing at this point in my life, but the 6-year-old version of me, or 5 or 6 years old, however I was, watching Bon Jovi change all those costumes and come down on rappelling into the center of the crowd. I was like, whoa, man. Being on stage playing rock and roll is awesome. So I love that. That was my very first concert.
That's super cool. Do you have a go-to artist that you're listening to right now that you want to do a quick shout out for?
Oh man, that's such a great question. I really love, there's this band from Michigan, Detroit, I think they're called Greek Death. I think they're on Deathwish Records, maybe? A little bit more of a heavier shoegazy kind of, a little bit more of a dirgier band. But man, they have this amazing song that came out last year called Country Girl that I think is just great. It's an awesome example of an earworm and something that gets stuck in your head. And there's, I haven't listened to this band in a long time, but Modest Mouse dropped a single recently. It was awesome. Like Third Side of the Moon or something. I don't know if you've heard that song. I was like, oh man, this is like actually kind of old school Modest Mouse. It was really awesome. And I love a lot of electronic music. So I'm a big Fortet fan. And Fortet dropped a couple of remixes from some other people that remixed some of his songs. Baby and I think Love Child maybe, or I forget what the song was. But so I have sort of eclectic taste, but I'd say if you pulled up my phone and looked at my Spotify or my Apple Music, you'd probably find that, or maybe a Fleetwood Mac song I heard you recently.
Nice. That's awesome.
I discovered this. So real quick, this is my Max, the director of the 0 Hour video, the director of the next couple videos too, including Breathing Air. We were filming one day. We were driving back in his truck, and he just put on Spotify, and this Fleetwood Mac song came on called Sarah, which I could not believe I'd never heard that song. And I mean, you know Stevie Nicks right away.
Oh yeah.
And that song's been like in my head, man, incessantly for like the last month. Is like, so I'm all over the place, Mike.
That's cool. I dig that. It's funny. Like, I think a lot of us now are all over the place. I same way. Like, you look at my playlist. I have playlists for all different kinds of moods, and then some playlists that are I hate to be a little bit. I have one called 2000s Nostalgia, and it's like a complete blend of like rock, but also like electronics in there too, because I was like big back then in the early 2000s. Yeah. So
totally.
I think all of us are like that.
I'm going to turn it back on you just real quick. What's been what's at the top of your plan right now? Like, what can you leave
I'm really into this artist called her name is Lolo, and she's awesome.
Lolo?
So okay. Lolo, she's awesome. She's very very alt. I would say like pseudo emo, maybe not emo, but very alt style, and she's awesome. One of my favorite bands right now is called Stan Atlantic, and they're another alternative band. So I really like alternative rock music. So that's kind of like my jam.
Awesome.
So those are the latest ones, but like again, like sometimes I have my guilty pleasures songs and things like that too, and so forth. So like sometimes we'll jam out to that too. It's like, I love all kinds of music, and, like sometimes I'll be in the mood and like, all right, I'm listening to all my alt music and rocking hard. And sometimes I'm just rocking to Backstreet Boys and like, that's just going hard on Backstreet Boys.
Listen,
it's all over the place. It's all over the place.
I mean, listen, I love that, Backstreet Boys, Roxette, Madonna, like all kinds of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That's like out of left field, like, I love as well. So stay in Atlanta. Stay in Atlanta or Atlantic?
Stand Atlantic. Stand
Okay,
Atlantic.
Stand Atlantic.
Very
Logo.
alt style. Yeah.
Check it out.
So
thanks for the recommendations.
Yeah, and I'll do I'll also do a quick shout. Actually, definitely actually somebody should be in your radar. Her name is Madison Violet, and she's a baby artist. She just got started, but she was actually a guest on the show not too long ago. Sick. And she's doing fantastically well. So I'm not sure which episode's going to come out first, yours or hers, but
cool.
Also she's pretty awesome too. So I'll give her a quick shout out to her.
Yeah, sick, man.
But yeah, we'll start wrapping things up here. One last question for you actually is, if you were only able to give one piece of advice to a fellow musician, what would that one piece of advice be?
Great question. Oh man, single piece of advice. I would say probably don't settle. Don't sit on it forever, but don't settle either. That goes back to the burnout thing, push through the wall a little harder, even when you think maybe you've hit it. And that might be where you find the best version of that piece of music. I think it's easy with the tools today to say, oh, that's done and pencils are down. And it's much harder to say, let me dig into this to the point where after this, I don't ever want to hear this ever again. But a lot of times that's when I know something's done for me. I go from wanting to listen to it every single moment of the day to this stinks. I hate it. And nobody will ever like it. That's when you probably hear it.
I love that so much. That is so true. Wow. That's so great. I love that. That's actually one of my favorite pieces of advice I've heard in a long time. So that's great.
Awesome, man. Thanks.
But thank you, Joey. Thank you so much again for being on the show. This is fantastic. We'll make
Likewise,
sure that we have everything
you.
in the show notes. Make sure everyone takes a listen to the single "Breathing Air." I can't wait to hear everything else that's coming up ahead for you guys. So congratulations again, and
thanks, Mike. Thank you. I appreciate you, man. I'm very grateful for the conversation. Thank you for the kind words. Thank you for the shout outs and recommendations, and being a cool vibe, man. I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.